Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. The story begins with one of the most ruthless moves in rock history, Ritchie Blackmore firing his entire band. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back a few months earlier when Blackmore was still a member of Deep Purple. By 1975, Deep Purple was one of the biggest rock bands in the world. They had already gone through several lineup changes. Each era had its own sound. The classic Mark II lineup with Ian Gillan and Roger Glover giving us iconic albums like Machine Head and Made in Japan. But after Ian Gillan and Roger Glover left, the band moved into a new phase with singer David Coverdale and bassist Glenn Hughes. At first it worked. We had albums like Burn and Stormbringer. This showed a funkier, more soulful side of Deep Purple. But Ritchie Blackmore wasn't happy with his new direction. Blackmore had always been drawn to heavier sounds. He loved classical music, medieval themes, powerful rock riffs, and to him, the funk and soul influence creeping into Deep Purple felt like a step in the wrong direction. But wait, here's where things get interesting. By early 1975, he'd have enough. Blackmore started looking for a way out, but rather than quit the band immediately, he came up with an idea. He would record a solo single, just one song, a cover of Black Sheep of the Family, originally by Quatermass. Blackmore thought it would be something fun, something heavier, more guitar-driven than what Deep Purple was doing. You're not going to believe what happens next, because for vocals, he turns to Ronnie James Dio, the singer of Elf. Ritchie Blackmore shared bills with Elf before. Deep Purple and Elf often toured together, so he already knew Dio's voice. Dio had this incredible mix of power, control, and emotion. Blackmore later said he was blown away for the first time hearing him sing, so when he needed a vocalist for the solo track, Dio was the obvious choice. They went into the studio and recorded Black Sheep of the Family, but once the session was over, Blackmore had a realization this couldn't be just a one-off. The chemistry between his guitar and Dio's vocals was too good. They needed to make a full album. But wait, there's a problem now. The problem was Ritchie Blackmore didn't have a band. So he did the practical thing. He borrowed one. Instead of auditioning new players, he just took Dio's entire group, which was called Elf, and that gave him a complete lineup overnight. Dio on vocals, Gary Driscoll on drums, Craig Gruber on bass, Mickey Lee Sewell on keyboards, and it wasn't meant to be permanent, but it got the job done. Now it's time to take a step forward. With this group, Blackmore entered Musicland Studios in Munich, Germany, and in just a few short weeks, they recorded what would become Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow. Now, this was not just another rock record. From the very first track, it sounded like something new. It had Blackmore's signature guitar work, classical flourishes, heavy riffs, soaring solos, but also had Dio's unique lyrical vision. Dio wasn't writing about partying or love in the traditional sense. He was pulling from mythology, fantasy, mystical imagery, castles, rainbows, knights, magic. This combination gave the album a completely different personality than Deep Purple. When the album was released in August 1975, it made a statement. Even the cover art was symbolic. A giant rainbow over a castle representing this new direction. But now you're thinking, what about the music? Is it Deep Purple Part 2? No, it was completely different. The opening track, Man on the Silver Mountain, this really set the tone. It became the album's signature song, one of Rainbow's defining tracks. It's heavy, catchy, it perfectly blends Blackmore's guitar with Dio's commanding voice. Even today, it's remembered as one of the great rock anthems of the 1970s. But this wasn't a hard-rocking metal album. It's not like something you're going to headbang to all the way through. It had some lighter moments. So there was another song, Catch the Rainbow. It showed a completely different side of the band. It's slower, atmospheric, almost dreamlike. Blackmore's guitar playing was delicate and melodic, while Dio delivers one of his most heartfelt performances. The song is often compared to Jimi Hendrix's Little Wing. You can hear that influence. It gave the album depth, proving Rainbow wasn't just about heavy riffs, but emotion and storytelling as well. But like I said before, they were really influenced with fantasy and medieval stuff and all that. So that brings us to 16th century Greensleeves, which was another highlight. You hear Blackmore's love for medieval and Renaissance music shining through. Lyrics tell a story of castles in ancient times, and the music blends rock with classical influences. This song foreshadowed the style Rainbow would become known for in the years ahead. But Ronnie James Dio always had a voice for heavier music and metal, and this next song is like some proto-heavy metal or even heavy metal. But it's called Temple of the King. It's a little more subdued, but Dio's vocals are very powerful. Dio's lyrics painted vivid pictures of seekers and holy guests, and Blackmore's guitar lines gave the song a mystical, almost spiritual feeling. For many fans, it's one of the most underrated songs in Rainbow's entire catalog. Then there's other deep cuts like Self-Portrait, Still I'm Sad, which is a cover of a Yardbird song. This rounded out the album. They each added to the mix of hard rock, fantasy, and atmosphere. The album was a success. Fans embraced it, critics praised it, and Rainbow was officially born. But behind the scenes, Ritchie Blackmore was already plotting his next move. He felt while the album was strong, it wasn't exactly what he wanted. The members of Elf were solid musicians, but in Blackmore's mind, they weren't capable of taking Rainbow to the next level. So, in classic Blackmore fashion, he made a ruthless decision. He fired the entire band. Everyone except Dio, of course. It was cold, decisive, but it set the tone for the rest of Rainbow's history and who Ritchie Blackmore was in general. Ritchie Blackmore was always the driving force, and the lineup would constantly change depending on what he wanted. For the next album, Rising in 1976, Ritchie Blackmore brought in a whole new group of musicians, including powerhouse drummer Cozy Powell, bassist Jimmy Bain, and keyboardist Tony Carey. This lineup would go on to create one of the greatest hard rock albums of all time, but none of that would have happened without the foundation laid by Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow in 1975. Looking back, this debut album is fascinating. On the one hand, it was a transitional product, almost accidental, born out of frustration with Deep Purple and fueled by a desire for something new. On the other hand, it was a spark that lit the fire for one of the most influential bands in hard rock and heavy metal. This was the album that gave Ronnie James Dio his first big international exposure. It set him on the path to becoming one of the greatest metal vocalists in history. It allowed Ritchie Blackmore to fully embrace his vision of blending heavy rock with fantasy and classical influences. It gave the world timeless songs like Man on the Silver Mountain and Catch the Rainbow. So yes, it started with Ritchie Blackmore firing his entire band, but out of that shakeup came a new beginning, the birth of Rainbow, a band that will go on to shape the sound of hard rock and heavy metal for years to come. If you want to hear about the story of Ritchie Blackmore leaving Deep Purple and the Stormbringer album, this next video I have over here is kind of like the prequel to this video. So if you haven't watched it already, watch that next. And in the meantime, thanks for watching. Give the video a like. It helps me with the YouTube algorithm. Please subscribe if you have not already. I do rock and metal reviews, rankings, and more. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one.